Hey guys, today we're going to talk about what really builds muscle. The first thing to know is that tension is the most important thing. Mechanical tension, number one driver of hypertrophy. It's the force a muscle generates while contracting under load. When the muscle experiences sufficient tension, especially in stretch positions, it triggers a growth signal through mechanotransduction, leading to larger and stronger fibers. That's really all you need to know there. We're going for tension, okay? Number two, technique matters a lot, right? We're looking for controlled eccentrics, right? The eccentric doesn't itself build muscle as much as what was once thought, like, oh, the tearing of the muscle fiber, right? But the key thing with controlling the eccentric is that you're not letting gravity do the work. And you need a way to actually track it reliably that you're getting stronger. So let's say you're doing 40-pound dumbbell presses and then you're doing it with good form and then we up it to 50 and now you're just going like crazy. You're doing more and for the same amount of reps, but you actually didn't increase the amount of tension that you placed the muscle under because you're just throwing the weight around. So technique is huge in actually building muscle, right? The next thing is range of motion, right? You typically want to train a muscle in its full range of motion. That's going to be the best way for the long-term gains. Also, though, partial range of motion reps can be super beneficial in building muscle when you are placing the muscle under a stretched load. So that's typically like the bottom portion, right? If you're at a bicep, right? Bicep curl. It's that bottom portion at the bottom right here where you're getting the most tension, right? Not when you're up here and you're just fighting a little bit of the gravity and the most contracted portion of the movement, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Full range of motion and lengthened partials are both effective for building muscle. Always start with full range of motion. Work your way into getting more specialized with lengthened partials later on. And then you also want to prioritize exercises that load the muscle at those long lengths, typically for better hypertrophy, right? Where something like a tricep kickback, where you're not having a full range of tension, right? Only at the top where there's gravity, then it's not that optimal. And you're just working at the most contracted position, and it's just not the best for hypertrophy, right? Something like an overhead would be great because you're in this stretch position, and this right here is going to help you build a lot of stimulus in that long head of the tricep, all right? So next, we have effort and intensity. You need to push your sets hard. Most people stop too soon, so proximity to failure is very important, right? You can make beginner gains even with 4 to 5 reps left in the tank. This is true. But in all cases, from beginners to advanced intermediates, you need to push it closer to failure to really maximize your gains and to even see those gains take place, right? Compound lifts, generally, you probably want to leave it 1 to 3 reps in reserve to be safe, generally speaking, right? If I told you go do a bench press to failure, you might die because we have a bench on, a bar. But if you're on a hammer press machine or something like that, you can safely take those to failure, right? So it depends. It's also a little more fatiguing to take a compound lift to failure like that. So you need to be a little more selective. It's a lot more safe to do isolation lifts that you could train to failure more often, especially all the sets or the last sets. If you're doing a bicep curl, train to failure, right? You're probably not going to have any issue there. Next up, we've got progressive overload, right? We got this in another course section, but right, muscles grow by handling more work over time, right? And the main method is increasing mechanical tension, which means you need to add more weight over time. You can also pair this with doing more volume, adding more reps, more sets and stuff like that. But improve your form, improve your mind-muscle connection, control the negative, go full range of motion. The consistency is going to be what matters here, and you're going to be tracking it to make sure that you are progressively overloading without sacrificing technique. Let's talk a little bit about exercise selection and why this is so important, right? You need to focus on those high tension exercises that give you consistent tension, right? And that makes machines and cables very effective for building muscle, right? They're safer to push to failure, they're more stable, and it's just gonna help you, right? Where if you don't get me wrong, a barbell back squat is awesome, but you know what else is just as awesome? A hack squat machine for building your quads, right? It's a little less fatiguing, more targeted. You can push it more safely close to failure, right? And that's where we also talk about like exercise selection compounds versus isolations, right? Like a squat is awesome. It's going to be the king. If you can only do one thing, it's probably going to be a squat. But it doesn't mean that using machine like leg extension and leg curls is not a great option, because it is awesome, and they're great for hypertrophy, right? And you could target lagging body parts and add more detail, okay? Overall, though, I think you're going to want to stick to like a big three for overall strength. But they're not always going to be ideal for purely hypertrophy focused plans. A good mixing of both will really do you a good service. Next up, we'll talk about volume, right? So volume is the total sets per muscle per week. That's how we're using this in context. And typically, more volume is going to be a bit more gains up to a certain point, right? General sweet spot is 10 to 20 sets per muscle per week, right? And that's going to be adjusted based on your recovery and your lifting experience and just genetics, honestly. So there's a bell curve, right? And in that bell curve, most people see progress with 10 to 20. You may need more, you may need less, right? Like let's say there's very many reasons. Like you may need more because you are advanced or your body just doesn't respond to it. But let's even say, for example, you are, lifting with not great form. And so you're not creating as much tension and stimulus within that muscle. Then you might not respond to 10 to 20 sets because you need more, because you're not actually efficiently targeting the muscles. And what people can see is that when they become more advanced, they actually don't need as many sets sometimes to be able to get the same progress, because they are so focused and you are able to recruit those muscle fibers at a better rate than you can a beginner, right? So something to keep in mind. It's a starting point. I generally like to start off at the lower end, start off your 10 sets per week for the muscle group, and then increase that over time to 20 to see where you're going to make the most gains with your recovery. Next is frequency, right? Most natural lifters are going to benefit from training each muscle twice per week, right? You can do 3 times per week. You're going to want, to manage your volume accordingly as well on that. But this is pretty much what matches up with your muscle protein synthesis window, right? About 24 to 48 hours post-workout. We'll talk a little bit about nutrition here. Energy balance is going to be key, right? Like a small caloric surplus is best for muscle gain, about 5 to 15% surplus. Body recomposition is possible for beginners and detrainees. It is also possible for advanced lifters as well. You definitely can build muscle like at maintenance and even in a caloric deficit. It just becomes harder, generally speaking. You will feel better and make a little bit more consistent progress if you're in that slight surplus. Now, we are not bulking. We just want to get in a slight surplus to maximize that and make sure we're getting enough to fuel our body to have the best workouts that we can have. And not to mention, if you're trying to put on like a measurable amount of progress, like in your physique change, like you need to put on some body weight. Like where is the mass supposed to come from? Nothing, so just keep that in mind. Protein intake, we're going to talk about more in other videos, but this is super important, right? 0.8 grams to 1 to 2 grams per pound is helpful, right? Generally, if you're in a surplus, you can do a little bit lower. You can go for like 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. If you're in a deficit, it's more advantageous to do 1 to 1.2 gram per pound of body weight. And if you're talking optimally, spread the protein across several meals for optimal muscle protein synthesis. But generally, you just need to really worry about what your total intake for the day is, and if it's coming from quality sources, right? And generally, other ways you want to optimize things is you want to fuel up pre-workout, right, with a little bit of protein and some good carbs, depending on how close you are to your workout when you're eating, right? If it's quicker digesting, you can eat closer. If it's a longer digesting, you're going to want to be further out to make sure you're not still digesting your food while you're working out. You can have intra-workout stuff if you want, right? Like some citrulline malate. There's all kinds of pre-workouts and intra-workouts, stuff like that, negligible. I personally like citrulline malate as a pre-workout and intra-workout as well. And then your post-workout, right? Protein shake, just have yourself a good meal, have carbs. That's going to help you. And then, last things we want to talk about here is recovery and genetics, right? So sleep and stress is going to play a huge role in whether or not you can really build muscle, right? So if you're having low sleep, you're going to have high cortisol and you're going to have worse gains. Your body needs sleep to recover. If you're getting low sleep, your testosterone's going to be lower if you're a male. So sleep is just so important. It's one of the main pillars of it all between you got your weightlifting, you get your nutrition, and then you need sleep, right? And stress also. Stress is a slow killer. We all know that. And if you have a lot of it, you need to try and bring it down because it's not going to support your recovery if you have high stress. Now, the last thing here to talk about is genetics and your training history, right? Like beginners gain faster, right? You can expect maybe 1 to 2 pounds a month in the first year for men. And that's going to taper off a lot, like as you start to train more and more. If you've trained in the past, you have some muscle memory, you can bounce back. And, overall, there's a big genetic component to how much muscle you will have and how much you can put on and how quickly. Like everybody's gonna be different, and you shouldn't compare yourself to other people and their transformations because, everybody's different. So overall, right, the long story short here is you made it this far. Thank you. More tension, smart stress on the muscles. You need solid recovery, and you're not relying on things like soreness or any of these fancy tricks, right? You just need to lift hard, recover well, eat right, and progress consistently with the program and track your lifts. Like that's what's really going to build muscle, okay? Thanks.